What's up, guys? It's Ryan, and this is the Kingsman Report. It's the news everyone ignores. Today is the 21st of November 2019. It's a Thursday, and I'm sure everybody's already heard this, but Benjamin Netanyahu, the Prime Minister of Israel, has been charged with corruption, and he has been indicted. I also have news on Bloomberg, who has filed his paperwork to run for U.S. president. And another article I find interesting: the MORE Act has passed through the House, and we could be looking at federal decriminalization and declassification of cannabis. So stay tuned for more. I'm going to get situated, and I'll be back with the news that everyone ignores. What's up, guys? If you can tell by the thumbnail, there is a cannabis leaf in the back there, and also that's a picture of media mogul Michael Bloomberg and also the Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu. So I'm gonna get into a few articles here. Hold on just a second. I'm going to get into a few articles. Of course, I obviously have one on Netanyahu. I have a couple on him. The one that I shared today, and then I have one that actually explains what is in the indictment or why he's being indicted. It has a whole list of his charges here. And then, of course, billionaire Michael Bloomberg files paperwork to run for U.S. president. And then, Secret Service stops a suspicious vehicle trying to get into the White House complex. And then I'm going to talk more about, I have a little bit on SpaceX. I'm not talking about, the explosion that happened yesterday or the day before. I'm not going to talk about that. A whole bunch of people are covering that, and I'm not really going to talk about that one, but I am going to talk about a company called NanoRocks booked SpaceX rocket to launch space habitat demo in 2020, and CubeSats 2. And then I'm going to talk about Keystone Pipeline leak. I have one on an ex-Baltimore mayor, Catherine Pugh, indicted on federal charges. She was writing a children's book. She obviously was scamming people. She failed to print the majority of the books there, and pretty much pocketed the money, paid off debts, and then didn't give people what they paid for. And this one I think is crazy, and I think it's real good for the law enforcement in this one, because two things I cannot stand in this world are men who prey on women and people in general who prey on small children. The small children would probably come first. I have 4 of my own. I also have, of course, the one on the House Judiciary Committee approves landmark marijuana legalization bill. And then I also have, I'm not going to necessarily read what the bill's, it covers it inside this article, but I posted in the description below the links that tell you more about what the MORE Act is about. And then what is crazy is this article, which I mean it's not crazy, but it's very interesting. It says pot stocks soar as U.S. House Committee clears bill on federal weed legalization. So I'm going to cover that. They actually shot up today. I pay attention to some of the stock markets. I don't I talk about crypto and I mess with it, but I haven't invested a bunch of money in that. A lot of people's opinion, it's kind of just, it's out there, so you don't really necessarily know. You're taking a risk. Honestly, I think you're taking a risk with stocks also. But yeah, the pot stocks shot up today, and there's a list of a few of them on here. And yeah, I went and purchased a few, but not very much money. And then, I have stuff on Hong Kong. Boy 12 is the youngest person convicted in Hong Kong protest. And then a video of Hong Kong protesters boarding train sparks fear of being sent to China. I also have more on the Bolivia crisis as new elections pose as violence rages. I have an article on Iraq protesters killed in renewed clashes. And then Colombian Union students plan strike marches and government's warning about possible violence in that one. And then, I covered whenever Chile started popping off real bad over there. I covered that. I streamed it, and, it got out of control. But Chilean security forces intentionally attacked protesters. So I have an article on that. So, I'm going to get into this, and I'm sure other people are going to be talking about this article or this in general because it was breaking news this afternoon. And of course, it's on Benjamin Netanyahu. So, Benjamin Netanyahu, Israel's prime minister, charged with corruption. Says Israel's Attorney General has charged Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu with bribery, fraud, and breach of trust in connection with 3 separate cases. Mr. Netanyahu is alleged to have accepted gifts from wealthy businessmen and dispensed favors to try to get more positive press coverage. The Prime Minister described the charges as an attempted coup, in quotes, blaming them on quote-unquote tainted process. He has also insisted he will not resign and is not legally obligated to do so. In a television speech, Mr. Netanyahu said authorities weren't after the truth, they were after me, and called on the country to investigate the investigators. Well, I'm sure if they're anything like the investigators in this country, I don't know how it is over there, but here it's not necessarily on the up and up. It says earlier Attorney General, these names are so hard to pronounce, Mandelblit, said he made the decision with a heavy heart, but said it showed nobody was above the law in Israel. Law enforcement is not a choice. It is not a matter of right or left. It is a matter of politics, he said. Or it's not a matter of politics, he said. But the announcement comes amid a political standoff in Israel following 2 inconclusive general elections in April and September. So if you guys have been watching, then Gantz and Netanyahu, they're kind of on a stalemate there as far as the votes go, and I think Netanyahu was given the first chance to establish the government with Gantz and see if they could form a united political party there. I think it's the Likud party and the Blue and White party, if I'm not mistaken. I may be wrong on that. But Benjamin Netanyahu failed, and then the President Revlin gave Benny Gantz the opportunity to form a government, and I don't think neither one of them were able to do so. And then all of a sudden, you have his indictment. So we're going to see where this goes. I mean, the article goes on later to say, on Wednesday, Mr. Netanyahu, rival for the premiership Benny Gantz, said he had been unable to form governing coalition with a majority in parliament. He had been given the opportunity to try after Mr. Netanyahu had earlier failed to do so. So we're going to watch this. I mean, it just seems like, politics and governments all over the world right now are kind of falling apart. And, who knows what's in store for Israel. But, whatever happens, I try to pray for everybody, I mean, if you're corrupt, then you're corrupt. There's really no way around that. I mean, we shall see. So this explainer kind of goes into all the charges that, most of the charges that he's been indicted on. And it says, Israel Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu was indicted on corruption charges on Thursday, presenting one of the gravest challenges yet to Israel's longest-serving leader. Netanyahu, who is 70, denies all wrongdoing, but now finds himself stuck in a political legal limbo. He has failed to put together a government after 2 inconclusive elections this year, now faces legal process that could drag on for years. Following is a guide to the criminal case against him. So these are the allegations. It says Attorney General Mandelblit announced that he has filed criminal charges against Netanyahu in an investigation list as cases 1000, 2000, and 4000. So on case 1000, centers on allegations that Netanyahu and his wife Sarah wrongfully received gifts from Arnon McCann, a prominent Hollywood producer and Israeli citizen, and Australian billionaire businessman James Packer. Those gifts allegedly included champagne and cigars, and it says he has been charged with fraud and breach of trust. In case 2000, alleges that Netanyahu negotiated a deal with the owners of Israel's best-selling daily newspaper, Yedioth Ahronoth, for better coverage. In return, prosecutors say he offered legislation that would slow the growth of rival daily newspaper. In this case, Netanyahu has been charged with fraud and breach of trust. So in case 4000, alleges that Netanyahu granted regulatory favors to Israel's leading telecommunications company, Bezek Telecom Israel, in return for positive coverage of him and his wife on a news website controlled by the company's former chairman. Netanyahu has been charged with bribery as well as fraud and breach of trust in this case. So this is what Netanyahu says. He denies any wrongdoing and says he is a victim of a politically orchestrated quote-unquote witch hunt, that sounds familiar, by the media and the left to oust him from office. Loyalists in Netanyahu's right-wing Likud party have accused the Israeli justice system of bias, and Netanyahu himself has argued that receiving gifts from friends was not against the law. His legal team says criminal probes into the relations between politicians and the news media would be a threat to a free press, a central pillar of any democracy. Well, it's not a central pillar to this democracy. Ours leans way to the left. I mean, way to the left. Whether you agree with them, don't agree with them. Our media, I mean, it's twisted. So whether you're a liberal and you listen to Fox News, or you're a conservative and listen to MSNBC, CNN, I read news articles from all of them. Whether you're from either one, I mean, pretty much anyone will say, one or the other is corrupt or leans to either side. But I mean, in this case, he's saying it's more to the other side and against his favor, and that may be true. But I mean, that's just how it goes. It's, to me, the media is the fourth branch of the government, and they pretty much can twist and corrupt any story to make anyone look like a piece of garbage. But I wish that there was more fair press in this country, and there are, a lot of behind the scenes guys or guys that don't work for major networks, that read news like this and give their opinions about things. But I think the media should just wake up, man, and start being fair to everybody. Do like old Cronkite used to do, and just read the facts, just read the news, and then let people decide how they want to be. Stop trying to manipulate people's emotions on what they should believe and how they should think, and let the people decide for themselves. So it would take many months before the case are brought before the court. Netanyahu could also seek a plea deal rather than stand trial. Netanyahu's allies in parliament, the Knesset, have said they would push to grant him parliamentary immunity from prosecution. But with Israeli politics and unprecedented turmoil, it is unclear whether such a move is even possible. It says bribery charges carry a sentence of up to 10 years in jail or a fine. Fraud and breach of trust carry a prison sentence of up to 3 years. Will there be a political fallout? Netanyahu has dominated Israeli politics for more than a decade, but both he and his main centrist rival Benny Gantz have failed to form a government after 2 elections in April and September, leaving the country in political and economic stasis. If there is no political breakthrough in the next 3 weeks, Israel will face yet another election, which few want. If he is still in office as prime minister after that, Netanyahu will be under no strict legal obligation to quit. According to Israeli law, a prime minister must step down if ultimately convicted, but can stay in office throughout legal proceedings, including appeals. It is unclear if allies, who have mostly remained loyal, will continue to stick by him. Some see it as a chance to emerge from beneath the shadow of a man who had been at or near the summit of Israeli politics for a generation, and who enjoys an international profile like no other Israeli politician. So if you guys want to check this article out, I put the link in the description below, and you guys can go there and read. And all the news articles that I'm reading tonight, I always put them in the description, and you guys can always check those out there. So this one I think is interesting because, now we have, a billionaire could be running against another billionaire. And, if people so badly enough want Trump out of office, then, the Democrats may get a billionaire that may run against Trump in the 2020 elections. But we'll see how this goes. It says billionaire Michael Bloomberg files paperwork to run for U.S. president. And it says billionaire Michael Bloomberg filed paperwork on Thursday with the Federal Election Commission to run for U.S. president as a Democrat. The latest sign that the former New York City mayor is joining the nominating contest. The filing allows Bloomberg to raise money in a bid for the White House, but an aide said on Thursday that no final decision on whether he will run has been made. Bloomberg, who is 77, has signaled that he plans a late entry in the Democratic primary, suggesting he feels the field of nearly 20 candidates is vulnerable. If he enters, he will likely forego the early states where potential rivals have been visiting for months. Bloomberg had already registered to appear on the ballot in Alabama, Arkansas, and Texas. A separate advisor said on Thursday that Bloomberg also filed to be on the ballot in Georgia and Michigan. So like I said, I'm going to watch this, but it's interesting to see, all these people entering in, and then, Elizabeth Warren's, wealth tax plan, or whatever they're calling that, where she wants to, tax the wealthy and redistribute the funds, or use it to pay for stuff. I mean, I don't know. So, we'll see what happens with this. It may get interesting here towards as it gets closer to time to vote. This one I thought was interesting, and I saw this on the news, but I haven't noticed if anyone else had read this article or said anything about it. But Secret Service stops suspicious vehicle trying to get into the White House complex. The unauthorized vehicle tried to get into the White House complex by following an unauthorized vehicle, the Secret Service said. It says the U.S. Secret Service on Thursday morning detained a person who was trying to get access to the White House in an unauthorized vehicle, authorities said. The Secret Service tweeted just after 6 a.m. that it was responding to a suspicious vehicle near the White House and that the roads in the area, including a portion of Pennsylvania Avenue, were closed. The Washington, D.C. Metropolitan Police Department and a bomb disposal team also responded. There's a picture of it there. I guess they pretty much, just ripped everything out of the car, searching it to make sure that nothing was in the vehicle. It said the unauthorized vehicle tried to get into the White House complex by following an unauthorized vehicle that was lawfully entering an external complex checkpoint, the Secret Service said. So the individual driving the vehicle was stopped and then taken into custody. In a photo from the scene near the White House and Lafayette Square shows a black SUV surrounded by luggage and what appears to be piles of colorful material. Yeah, I think I read another article that said that they ripped all the crap out of there and they were searching through it to make sure that there wasn't any explosives or anything illegal in the vehicle, but it doesn't say. I couldn't find an article that said if they found anything or anything of that nature. So it's probably just some idiot being an idiot. The last woman that did this, I don't know if you guys remember this, but the last woman that did this, she drove into the barricades, and I guess there's barricades that pop up out of the ground. She drove through the barricades, and I think she ended up being shot by the Secret Service or somebody on the White House grounds, police officer or something. But it ended up being some crazy thing. She said people were following her, and she was killed when that happened. So this, they keep talking about space, so I'm gonna keep reading their articles about space. But NanoRacks books SpaceX rocket to launch space habitat demo in 2020. CubeSats 2. So there's a little picture of a rocket there. But it says NanoRacks want to expand from hosting experiments on board the International Space Station to running its own miniature stations built from used rockets, with a first launch scheduled for next year. The company has arranged to launch 8 CubeSats and a space habitat construction experiment on SpaceX Falcon 9 rocket in late 2020, according to a NanoRacks statement released Monday, November 18th. The launch, in a partnership with Maxar, will be the company's first demonstration mission for its Outpost project and will cut material that mimics a used second-stage rocket while in space. That's the first step in turning such equipment into a space station that NanoRacks can be commercialized, according to the company. Structural metal cutting has never been done in space, and SpaceX is honored to help deliver a demonstration of this capability to orbit. Gwen Shotwell, President and Chief Operating Officer of SpaceX, said in the statement, "It's promising to see more companies like NanoRacks investing in new technologies to advance the exploration of the moon and ultimately Mars." It says last month, NanoRacks CEO Jeffrey Manber announced that the company intended to fly an Outpost demonstration mission like this in late 2020. With the Falcon 9 launch booked, the Outpost demonstration will join 8 other NanoRacks-run satellites on the flight. The demonstration is designed to slice the metal without producing any space junk. Such orbital debris is a real threat to existing and future satellites, which can be damaged or destroyed by collisions. Eventually, NanoRacks wants to turn used second-stage rockets into commercial space stations that could be headquarters for tourism, advertising, research, and other opportunities. Next year's test project relies on NASA funding. The agency wants to encourage private companies to develop an orbital economy. In June, NASA announced new opportunities for bringing commercial activities to the International Space Station, including hosting private astronauts for up to a month at a time. At the time, NASA also said that it was looking for ways to encourage companies to build independent space stations of their own. One project targeting this goal is already in space. The Bigelow Expandable Activity Module arrived at the space station in 2016 to test technology for such free-flying space stations. So we'll see what happens with that. I know, astronomers are already getting ticked off because they're saying that Elon Musk satellites are, causing problems with as far as trying to view stars and stuff like that. Like, there's been complaints. You can look all over the internet where it says that there's complaints. So, I mean, we'll see what happens with this. But, some people have their idea of space, and some other people think that all this stuff is fake. But, we'll see what happens. The one thing I was going to add is, if you guys ever listen to this and you decide to tune in live, I try to do it at 7 o'clock so I don't interrupt anyone that broadcasts in the daytime. Then I try to do it in the evening time so I don't interrupt anyone's broadcast in the nighttime, because there's guys that I like to watch, and then I also have to make sure that I'm not reading the same stuff that they're reading. And sometimes we do. Sometimes I read stuff before they do, and sometimes I read stuff the next day after they do. But there is a chat, and anyone's allowed to chat with that in that, and there's also a phone number you can call that's scrolling across the bottom of the screen. So if you're ever interested in doing that, you guys can feel free to do so. So this next news article, and this is pretty upsetting. I know there's a lot of indigenous tribes that are very upset about this. There was the protest of the pipeline going through, and apparently there's been an oil leak, and this article says that the latest Keystone Pipeline oil leak is almost 10 times worse than initially thought. So I think I can see if I can play this for you guys.
We have the cleanest air.
No. Some of his defenders will say, you guys in the media make too big a deal out.
Extension would stretch about 1,200 miles, most of it in the United States, from Alberta, Canada, down to Nebraska. There are lots of pipelines out there, some of which would connect with this. So why all the fuss about this extension? First of all, the environment. Opponents say that they fear that this will spoil the landscape. If there is a spill, that it could contaminate groundwater, hurt humans and animals. And they say this is dirty oil, a type of oil that when it's burned produces more greenhouse gases. Supporters say the company that wants this, TransCanada, has already promised much more robust safety measures, that rail shipments are rising already to bring this oil in, and the rail shipments are riskier than the pipeline would be. Second issue, jobs. Supporters like to cite a study that says somewhere around 42,000 jobs or more would benefit from this pipeline. That includes not only the people who work on it, but people in restaurants and hotels and supply houses. But opponents say that's all temporary. That's for 1 or 2 years while this thing is built. In the end, there may be only 50 permanent jobs coming out of this. So that raises the real question. Why would you want to build this thing at all? It's only about 36 inches across. Does it really make a difference? Supporters say yes, it does. It means about 830,000 barrels of oil a day coming into the United States from a secure ally, reducing our dependence on overseas oil from places like Venezuela or the Middle East. Whereas opponents say, look, it is just not worth it for all those various reasons they've already cited, even as supporters continue to say, look, it's time after all this debate to dig the trenches and to get this pipe into the ground.
So I actually used to work for a company in Sand Springs, Oklahoma that built these pipes, and they're made from fiberglass, and like the guy was saying, they're about 36 inches in diameter. And if they split, which can happen, they do what is called a butt wrap, and it's basically just a patch that goes around a bursted pipe, and if one bursts and they put a butt wrap on it, which I know it's a funny name for it, but if they put a butt wrap on it, they don't always hold. And because of the adhesives that they use, it's kind of hard to cut out that pipe in the field and then go and reinsert a new pipe. It takes all types of grinding, and then you can't compromise the integrity of the interior of the pipe, and you also can't compromise the diameter. So it's lathed down on the part that's inserted. They lathe it down and to where it fits, and then they have to be it has to be precise. They're measured with micrometers and odometers, and there are iodometers and micrometers, but they're made precise. So a lot of times they'll just go out there, instead of taking all the equipment in the field, they'll just go out there and they will excuse me, they'll just put a butt wrap on it, and the butt wrap is not necessarily the safest route to go with these things. It's just the fiberglass patch. These pipes are just fiberglass. They're not made out of any necessarily solid material, so it's basically just plastic. But it says the amount of land impacted by an oil spill in North Dakota is almost 10 times larger than initially reported, officials say. The disclosure comes about a month after Keystone 1 pipeline leaked about 383,040 gallons of oil. TC Energy, the company that owns the pipeline, shut it down on October 29 after discovering that the oil had leaked from the pipe into the surrounding wetlands. The pipeline was returned to service on November 10th following approval by the U.S. Pipeline and Hazardous Materials Safety Administration, TC Energy says. Initial reports of the leak released by TC Energy and North Dakota's Department of Environmental Quality estimated about 2,500 square yards of land were affected by the spill. Now they have both revised the size of the impact area to 4.8 acres or 23,232 square yards. It's almost 10 times the original estimate. There's a picture of it there. It says about 9,120 barrels of oil were leaked into surrounding wetlands. But it goes on to say the new estimates include both the surface and the subsurface impact of the leak. The initial 2,500 square yard estimate was based on visual observations alone, the company told CNN. During our initial response to the incident, we immediately sectioned off a larger area, approximately 25,000 square yards, around the visibly impacted section to secure the area. Provided for wildlife deterrent and air monitoring purposes, a TC Energy representative told CNN in an email. Despite this initial identification of 25,000 square yards to be blocked off, TC Energy did not update their website to reflect this number until Tuesday. After media reports of the large increase as impact estimates were released. The FAQ there now reads, has the impacted area of the spill increased? No, the impacted area has not increased beyond the original containment effort established on the day of the incident, which was approximately 4.8 acres. The initial estimate of the 2,500 square yards was based on the most prominently visible area. As noted in October 31st update, the initial size estimate was roughly half a football field. That area was closest to the pipeline area itself. This is exactly the kind of spill we are worried about when it comes to a Keystone XL being built. It has never been if a pipeline breaks, but rather when, Joy Braun, Indigenous Environmental Network frontline community organizer, told CNN at the time of the leak. The Department of Environmental Quality told CNN that the estimated 8,037 barrels of oil has been recovered out of the 9,120 spilled, and the Keystone 1 pipeline system extends 2,600 miles from Alberta, Canada, east into Manitoba, and then south to Texas, according to TC Energy. TC Energy controversial pipelines. It's not a singular leak. Look at the history, said Candy White, a Native Energy and Climate Campaign coordinator with the Indigenous Environmental Network. TC's most notable leak occurred in 2017 after about 210,000 gallons of oil leaked from the Keystone Pipeline in South Dakota, prompting months-long protests which drew up to 10,000 people at their peak. The company's Keystone XL pipeline would extend the pipe system beginning in Alberta and ending in Nebraska, cutting through Montana and South Dakota. Environmental groups opposed the expansion, arguing the pipeline supports extraction of crude oil from oil sands, a method which releases 17% more greenhouse gases than other extraction techniques. The pipeline would also cut across the Ogallala Aquifer, one of the world's largest underground deposits of fresh water. The oil transported through the Keystone Pipeline is thicker and stickier than traditional oil, requiring it to be combined with hazardous materials to transfer it through the pipeline, making it more difficult to clean up. Native American groups have also objected, arguing the pipeline would cross through their sovereign lands. The president signed an order approving construction of the Keystone XL pipeline in March, and the company plans to begin construction in 2020. It says a correction here. The headline on this story has been corrected to reflect the latest oil leak is almost 10 times worse than initially thought. If you guys want to go check that out. Personally, I'm Native American myself. I understand why these people are upset, especially if it's their sovereign land. I think that regardless, there should be respect for the indigenous people in their lands, and I think that they should find a more, conducive route about going to put this pipeline in, because like I said, if there's a temporary patch, they don't necessarily replace the whole pipeline. They put just a patch on it, and they don't always hold. And depending upon if it's cold, if they have to do a replacement, or if it's hot, it can take longer. Which they would have to shut the pipeline down. But by the time that happens, you're losing so much oil. So keep the indigenous people in your thoughts there. And, hopefully they'll work something out with this. But like I said, I think that you should at least respect the indigenous people and their land and not be building a pipeline, especially through the water aquifer there. So this article right here is just, it's crazy. Like, I don't understand if this lady didn't think that she would be caught doing this, or I mean, I don't know exactly what she was thinking, but she pretty much thought she could scam some people out of selling a children's book of all things, and then take their money from them, and not print the books to send them out to the people that purchased them. So of course, she was indicted on federal charges for a whole crap load of stuff. But the article says ex-Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh indicted on federal charges related to self-published children's book. said former Baltimore Mayor Catherine Pugh is facing federal charges related to what prosecutors say was a plot to enrich herself through sales of her self-published children's book series, according to a grand jury indictment made public Wednesday. Pugh, who is 69, is expected to self-surrender to U.S. Marshals Thursday before her first court appearance before U.S. District Judge Deborah K. Chasanow, according to a news release. The former mayor, who resigned her post in May amid the book sale controversy, is charged with conspiracy to commit wire fraud, 7 counts of wire fraud, conspiracy to defraud the United States, and 2 counts of tax evasion. The indictment was returned November the 14th. There's a picture of the scandalous woman there. Prosecutors say Pugh, who became Baltimore's 50th mayor on December 6, 2016, used her Healthy Holly book series in order to fund her lifestyle, in addition to her political campaign and political interest. She allegedly bought a house and paid down personal debt with the profits, according to the Baltimore Sun. The book scheme allegedly involved Pugh failing to print thousands of copies of the devil-selling titles in the series, the Sun reported. Prosecutors also allege Pugh listed her 2016 income as $31,000 when it was actually exceeded $322,000. My gosh. It says in April, Pugh announced she was taking an indefinite leave of absence after she had been advised by her physicians that she needs to take time to recover and focus on her health. She said she felt like she wasn't able to fulfill her obligations as mayor because of her deteriorating health brought on by a recent case of pneumonia. Ultimately, Pugh resigned amid state and federal investigations about her book series and apologized for the harm that I have caused to the image of the city of Baltimore and to the credibility of the office of the mayor. Pugh was the 3rd Baltimore mayor to face sustained calls to resign. Bernard Jack Young took her place. Former Baltimore mayor employees Gary Brown Jr. and Rosalind Weddington pleaded guilty to related charges. It was also revealed on Wednesday. Scandalous. So, this is allegedly that she did this, so I have to make that clear, but, I don't trust politicians myself, but I can't believe that she did that. This story's nuts. It says this is out of California. This dude, it says a California man arrested after DNA from Baskin-Robbins spoon links him to a sexual assault from 22 years ago. So, big ups to the police department that did this. But this is some hardcore investigation here. It says a California man was charged with sexual assault of 2 women over 22 years ago after police linked DNA from the crime scene to that of a sample recently collected from a Baskin-Robbins ice cream spoon. This reminds me of something out of like Law and Order, where someone they'll offer them a cup of water and they'll get the DNA off the cup of water, and then they'll run it to the lab and get a sample off of it to pin the murder on somebody. That's basically what happens in this case. It goes on to tell you what happened here, but it says Alameda County District Attorney Nancy O'Malley announced Monday that Gregory Paul Vane, 60, who will face multiple felony sexual assault charges in connection with the 2 separate assaults, both from 1997. It says according to prosecutors, a woman walking to Bay Area Rapid Transit Station after work on May 6 was attacked by an unidentified man who dragged her to a secluded area before he sexually assaulted her. Several months later, on September 7, a second woman was sexually assaulted while on a walk near Livermore High School. It says police were able to recover DNA from both crime scenes that were found to be a match to each other, and the samples were uploaded to the National DNA Database to no avail. Over 22 years later, investigators from the Livermore Police Department were able to get a lead using a genealogical search tool, which led them to Veen. Detectives began to surveil Veen in August after discovering that he had lived in Livermore for several decades, including around the time the crime was committed. According to a probable cause statement, the police subsequently collected several items that had been thrown in the garbage, including a Baskin-Robbins spoon that Vane used to eat ice cream. On August 28th, the lab turned back a positive match between Vane's DNA and a sample taken from both crime scenes. For over 20 years, the survivor of these sexual assaults have lived with the constant uncertainty that comes with not knowing when, if ever, their assailant will be identified and brought to justice, O'Malley said in a news release. My officer's specialized cold case unit and sexual assault unit worked alongside our law enforcement partners and will now ensure that Mr. Vane is held to account for the crimes he committed. Vane was arraigned on November 7 and is due back in court on Wednesday. Oops. Good. I'm glad this piece of garbage is in the jail where he belongs, and hopefully those women get the justice they deserve and they can put this to rest. And my thoughts and prayers are with them for that stuff. I can't stand people who do this stuff. So this is interesting. I don't know if it'll pass the Senate, but this is very interesting that that they would even do this. So the House Judiciary Committee approves a landmark marijuana legalization bill, and the article says, well, I guess hold on a second. Play this video for you guys.
The House Judiciary Committee passed a bill Wednesday that would effectively make marijuana legal. The Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement Act of 2019 passed by a count of 24 to 10. Jerry Nadler, chairman of the committee, introduced the bill and has gathered over 50 co-sponsors of the bill in the House. Quote, today's vote marks a turning point for federal cannabis policy and is truly a sign that prohibition's days are numbered. Aaron Smith, executive director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, said in a press release.
So, the Marijuana Opportunity Reinvestment and Expungement, or the MORE Act of 2019, passed by a count of 24 to 10. Gerald Nadler of New York, chairman of the committee, introduced the bill and had gathered more than 50 co-sponsors in the bill in the House. Today's vote marks a turning point for federal cannabis policy and is truly a sign that prohibition's days are numbered, Aaron Smith, executive director of the National Cannabis Industry Association, said in a press release. Under the MORE Act, weed would be removed from the Controlled Substance Act, federally legalizing cannabis across the country. Additionally, the past federal cannabis convictions would be required to be expunged. The bill would also establish a Cannabis Justice Office and an organization that would introduce a 5% tax on state legal cannabis sales, among other things. Weed-related businesses such as dispensaries would be able to apply for loans and grants through the Small Business Administration. Moreover, Veterans Affairs doctors would be allowed to prescribe medical marijuana in accordance with individual state cannabis laws. Wednesday's vote marks the first time that Congressional Committee has voted in approval of the legislation of marijuana. So you guys can go and check that out if you like. I also posted in the description the links that explain a little bit more about what they are, and you guys can read up on those. This article talks about pot stocks soar as the U.S. House Committee clears bill on federal weed legalization. So here's the deal with this. This article. So before you go out and you purchase, dump a bunch of money into the legal cannabis stocks, you have to take into consideration that it still has to go through the Senate, and I don't know exactly how they'll vote on it. Because the Democrats, pretty much are the majority in the House, then I can see why it would pass that way. I don't know how many Republicans are on board with this or not, but I also know in the Senate that the Republicans, are the majority in the Senate, and they're a little bit more conservative when it comes to these things. So I don't know how to go in the Senate, so I wouldn't just rush out and throw a whole bunch of money in these stocks here. Just kind of, if you're interested, you can watch them or whatever. But so, and this article explains that too. The guy that's in the article mentions that, but it says shares of marijuana companies rose on Thursday after U.S. Congressional Committee passed a legislation to decriminalize cannabis, taking it a step closer to being approved by the Democratic-controlled House of Representatives. So the bill, which was passed 24-10 in the House Judiciary Committee on Wednesday, sent shares of Canopy Growth, which Canopy Growth and Aurora Cannabis right now are the highest. Tilray is low, and I haven't checked on Euphoria, but yeah, the two highest are Aurora and Canopy Growth. But so it sent shares of Canopy Growth, Aurora Cannabis, Euphoria Inc., and Tilray Inc. up between 8% and 15%. We think federal legalization would be a big positive for investor sentiment surrounding cannabis equities, which have been battered by oversupply and steep price decline for the underlying commodity since becoming legal in Canada, said Garrett Nelson, senior equity analyst at CFRA Research. The approval comes 2 months after the House passed a bill to advance legalization that would allow banks to provide services to cannabis companies in states where it is legal. The latest bill, which has more than 50 co-sponsors, enables states to set their own policies while allowing to expunge federal marijuana convictions and arrests. Additionally, the bill would authorize a 5% federal sales tax on marijuana products that are manufactured in or imported into the United States. However, analysts are skeptical about the future bill. It's such an early step in the long process that there are no near-term implications for cannabis stocks. The Senate isn't likely to approve it, even if the House were to do so, said Alan Brockstein, managing partner at New Cannabis Ventures. Even if it doesn't, in the future, probably will become, federally decriminalized. But even if it, right now, if it isn't, you could still invest in these stocks. Even if you're in this country, you can invest in those stocks. They're on our stock market if you're interested in it. But like I said, I wouldn't dump a whole bunch of money in it. Now, if it opens to imports, you'll probably see the price start to go up. But like this article says, and I said earlier from watching it, you could watch it climb today. I mean, it was climbing a lot. So a lot of people are, taking advantage in hopes that this bill will pass through the Senate. But like with anything, it's a risk. Like with crypto, it's a risk. Like anything. So just be careful and, be mindful about where you put your money, and don't just throw it all in the stock market. I don't necessarily trust the stock market per se. I kind of like to trade like penny stocks and things like that, but I don't invest a lot of money in there just because of the hyperinflation and deflation, and they pump it up and make it look like it's got something that it doesn't. But if you're interested, you can check this article out too. I'll read more here, but you can check this article out, and in this article that's in the description below, you can look up those businesses that are trading on the stock market. It says shares in the sector are down more than 25% this year, according to the Alternative Harvest ETF, which tracks cannabis-related stocks, taking a blow from a slow roll out of retail stores and oversupply in Canada, as well as uncertainties related to U.S. regulations. weed companies have been spending heavily to expand and strike partnerships in the United States, banking on more states legalizing cannabis for both recreational and medical use. Currently, 11 U.S. states have legalized marijuana for recreational use, Oklahoma just becoming one of those where I'm at, while 33 states have approved it for medical purposes. So like I said, if you guys want to try your hand at the stock market with the cannabis stocks, you can buy little shares. I think I just threw in like $3. I didn't even put in a bunch, but you can try it there. But I officially own shares in cannabis companies. Not a lot, but just something fun for to play with. So this is pretty sad here, but boy who's 12 is the youngest person convicted of Hong Kong protest. There's a picture of it. If you guys haven't been following this, which I'm sure you have, the whole world is following what's going on over here in over there in Hong Kong. But the article says a boy aged 12 has become the youngest person convicted of an offense connected to Hong Kong's anti-government protest, local media say. The child, who cannot be named, obviously he's a minor, was arrested on his way to school the day after a demonstration in October. He admitted causing criminal damage by spray painting slogans on a police station and a metro station, and will be sentenced next month. There have been more than 5,000 arrests since the protest started in June. A number of these have been children between the age of 12 and 15, although this is the first time one of them have been convicted. So prosecutors told the magistrate's court that a plainclothes police officer saw the child spray "Damn rogue cops" and "Divine Annihilation, Free HK" on the walls of a Mong Kok police station and Prince Edward MTR station on the 3rd of October. The police then followed the boy home and waited outside all night, according to South China Morning Post. When the child left for school at 7 o'clock the following morning, the officer intercepted him and conducted a search of his home, where black paint was found. The boy's lawyer, Jacqueline Lam, told the court he was held overnight at a police station after his arrest, which has been an important lesson for him. I asked the court to give him a chance, she said. After all, he's just 12 years of age. So this kind of goes into why the protests are happening, if you guys aren't privy to what's going on. You can watch some of the footage of it, and people were shining, crazy laser beams at the facial recognition software that the police departments have over in China, because it from what I understand from reading into it, they're a pretty big, technocratic authoritarian system dictatorship over there, and they have facial recognition software to where they can just go through and scan people's faces that are breaking the law and then go find them later on. So people were, wearing masks, which I think is outlawed there, and they were also shining laser beams, and it was just getting crazy. And recently they destroyed a college there. They've armed themselves with bow and arrows, Molotov cocktails, you name it. They're going hard over here in Hong Kong. But it says protests first started in June, sparked by a proposed bill that would have allowed the authorities to extradite criminal suspects to mainland China. Hong Kong is part of China, but as former British colony enjoys freedoms not seen on the mainland. Although the bill itself has withdrawn, protesters are continuing to demand an inquiry into police brutality and amnesty for everyone who has been arrested. But ultimately, the movement has at its root a fear, especially among young people, that their unique identity is under the threat from China. There's a picture there. You can see some of the bottles used for the Molotov cocktails, some of the spray paint here. It says this week they have focused on a siege of Hong Kong's Polytechnic University, or PolyU campus, which turned into a fiery battleground with police firing tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters. In turn, demonstrators threw Molotov cocktails and shot arrows. More than 1,000 people have been arrested so far and accused of rioting, while hundreds of others have fled the campus amid the shortage of food and hypothermia-inducing temperatures. Police said hundreds of protesters were under the age of 18. Although the siege is nearly to an end, dozens of people remain inside. Pray for the people in Hong Kong and what they're going through. It's just this whole fighting over imaginary lines, and people wanting power and more tax from people, and have the the need to rule over the people. It's getting out of hand. And this this is pretty insane here, but video of handcuffed HK protesters boarded train sparks fears of being sent to China. So you can see them there. Some of the protesters, they look young. A lot of them look young. But you can see some of the protesters there in handcuffs, and the police department there in black garb. Kind of looks like our riot police over here. Here's some of the tweets here. It says arrested protesters are getting transported out on a train unknown at this time where they will be sent. Residents and press are heard asking for their names. There's a video there. I'm not going to play it, but the video posted by Twitter user Wappa1Wappa on Monday shows the handcuffed protesters being forced onto a train. Internet users expressed their concerns as it was unknown where the protesters were being sent, according to Taiwan News. There's some more tweets here. The destination is the primary concern. Very worried they will be sent to China. Transport to concentration camps in China, one asked the question. And, several users who replied to the tweet identified the train as allegedly belonging to the East Rail line of the Mass Transit Railway. Says this is the East Line, and the last stations are Lo Wu and Lak Ma Chau. The destination of the detained people in the video remains unknown, but some users have claimed that the last two stations of the line are Lo Wu and Lak Ma Chau. Both stops are border checkpoints to China. Another user said there were no Hong Kong police stations located in any of the stops along the train's route. So there's some more pictures here. You guys can go and go through all the pictures. There's also, someone shared the license plates of some of the vehicles. I'm not going to put those on here either. But you guys can go into the description below and find the link there and read more about what's going on there. So I've covered a lot of the protests, especially the one in Chile whenever it was going pretty crazy over there, pretty much right as it had started. And that's in my videos if you guys want to check that out. I streamed it live. So there's riots in Hong Kong, Chile, Bolivia, Iraq. Just all over the place. There's protests going on. Just people tired of their government, tired of price hikes because of some say our tariffs are causing the price hikes in fuel and different commodities over there, and people are just fed up with it, and they think that their government should be able to do more without being dependent upon us. And then some are just they're tired of the leaders they have, and they're because of voting fraud and everything else, they're taking to the streets and they're kicking out their leadership, and they're trying to vote in new leadership. And then you have people that are kind of taking the place as the president while they don't have one. So this article is titled Bolivia Crisis, New Elections Proposed as Violence Rages. And you can see some of the pictures there. These people are armed with freaking wood sticks and their faces covered. So Bolivia's interim president has asked Congress to approve new elections as violence rages following the resignation of Evo Morales. However, Janine Áñez did not set a date for the poll, and Mr. Morales resigned on the 10th of November and later sought asylum in Mexico after facing claims of electoral fraud. The death toll since October's disputed general election has risen to 32 as clashes between supporters of Mr. Morales and security forces. Mr. Morales is accused of security forces of committing genocide against his indigenous supporters and requested assistance from the international community. His supporters have been blocking main roads linking the capital, La Paz, and other major cities, causing widespread disruption across the country. Ms. Áñez said she hoped the proposal, which also seeks the annulment of the original ballot and the formation of a new election tribunal, would help generate a national consensus. Justice Minister Alvaro Coimbra said the hope was for Congress to approve the law as soon as possible. Mr. Morales' Movement for Socialism Party has tabled a similar proposal. So part of the genocide, it says, on Tuesday, violence erupted in the city of El Alto as security forces clashed with supporters of Mr. Morales who had blocked a fuel plant for days. The Attorney General's office said 8 people died in those clashes. It's just getting crazy over there. Speaking at a news conference in Mexico City, Mr. Morales decried the behavior of the security forces. He said in a quote, "This massacre is part of a genocide that is happening in our beloved Bolivia." But Interior Minister Arturo Murillo played a recording to reporters allegedly of Mr. Morales instructing a supporter to block food entering the cities. The order was a crime against humanity, he was quoted saying, accusing the ex-president of quote-unquote terrorism. In the coming hours, we will file an international lawsuit on this, he added. It says, how do we get there? It says, Mr. Morales, a former cocoa farmer, took office in 2006 and became the country's first leader from an indigenous community. He won plaudits for fighting poverty and improving Bolivia's economy, but drew controversy by defying constitutional limits to run for a 4th term in October's election. Pressures have been growing on him since contested election results suggested he had won outright in the first round. The result was called into question by Organization of American States, OAS, a regional body which has found clear manipulation and called for the result to be annulled. In response, Mr. Morales agreed to hold fresh elections, but this main rival, Carlos Mesa, who claimed second in the vote, said Mr. Morales should not stand in any new vote. The Chief of the Armed Forces, General Williams Kelman, then urged Mr. Morales to step down in the interest of peace and stability. Announcing his resignation, Mr. Morales said he had taken the decision into order to stop fellow socialist leaders from being harassed and persecuted and threatened, he was quoted saying. This is the interim right here. He says, as the Deputy Senate leader, Ms. Áñez took temporary control of the body last Tuesday after Bolivia's vice president and the leaders of the Senate and lower house resigned. That put her next in line for the presidency under the Constitution. The appointment of Ms. Áñez, an opposition senator, as interim leader has been endorsed by Bolivia's Constitutional Court. Ms. Áñez previously told the BBC that her exiled predecessor should face prosecution if he returned to the country. He probably will not return to the country. But, you know, stranger things have happened. So this is more on a protest here. You know, it seems like I cover a lot of daunting news. But, you know, people everywhere are going at it for things that, you know, we take for granted every day in this country. And these people are, you know, just wanting to fight their government to get more freedoms and don't like the certain things they're going through. And then people are, are losing their lives over these protests. And I think it's sad. I don't like covering this type of stuff, but it just goes to show you, if people rise up against the people that lord over them, then the people definitely outnumber the elites in charge. And it can be, things can be changed, but I think, if they keep going at it like this, more people are probably going to end up dying as a result of these protests. And, I pray for these people. I don't know them. They may have different religious backgrounds than I do. And, but, at the end of the day, they're all human beings. And I still think that we should pray for these people regardless of their faith. Some people may not agree with me on that, especially, people that come out of this country here, but it says, Iraq protesters killed in renewed clashes. It says overnight clashes between anti-government demonstrators and security forces in Baghdad have killed 4 people and injured more than 40. New clashes overnight, and it's going to keep saying that word, and it's going to start getting filtered. Throttle back. In Baghdad, between anti-government demonstrators, security forces have killed 4 protesters, Iraqi security and hospital officials say. The altercations on 2 key bridges in the Iraqi capital also left at least 44 people wounded, the official said, speaking on the condition of anonymity. In line with regulations, both bridges appeared to be calmed by morning hours. Initial reports had 2 killed, but the death toll later rose after 2 of the wounded protesters died of their wounds. Fighting also resumed overnight in the Shiite holy city of Karbala, south of Baghdad, between protesters and security forces. In Baghdad, 1 protester was killed when security forces used live rounds to repel demonstrators on Ahar Bridge. The other protester was killed when a tear gas canister was fired on Sinak Bridge, hitting him in the head. 2 protesters later succumbed to their injuries. Protesters have been occupying parts of Baghdad's 3 main bridges, Sinak and Ahar, and I can't even pronounce that one here. I'm not even going to try it. Well, I might try that one. Jumeirah, leading to the heavily fortified Green Zone, the seat of Iraq's government. Tents have been set up under the bridge and also on the central Tahrir Square, the epicenter of the protest movement, where first aid volunteers treat those wounded by pieces of exploded tear gas canisters and live fire. Around 1:30 a.m., the shooting started with live ammunition, tear gas, and sound grenades, said one volunteer, speaking on conditions of anonymity for fear of government reprisal. There were mortars, and we received several injured people with breathing difficulties and bullet wounds. In Karbala, the protesters threw crudely made firebombs, also known as Molotov cocktails, at security forces, while anti-riot police responded by throwing stones at the protesters. Dozens of protesters had attacked the Iranian consulate in the city earlier in November, scaling concrete barriers and saying they rejected the influence of the neighboring country in Iraqi affairs. At least 320 protesters have been killed and thousands have been wounded since the unrest began on October 1st, when demonstrators took to the streets of Baghdad and across Iraq's mainly Shiite south to decry rampant government corruption and lack of basic services despite Iraq's oil wealth. The leaderless movement seeks to dismantle the sectarian system and unseat the government, including Prime Minister Mahdi. So, if you guys want to read more on that, it's in the description. So this one is kind of a warning against violence, but it looks like the Colombian unions are fixing to go for it. So Colombian unions, let me make this bigger here. Colombian unions, students plan strike, marches, government warns against violence. And this is in Bogota. It says Colombian unions and student groups are planning a strike on Thursday with marches to insist the government maintain minimum wages for young people and the universal right to a pension. At a time of widespread unrest in other Latin American countries, police this week raided Activist and Culture magazine ahead of protest, while Colombia's President Ivan Duque warned his government will not tolerate violence. The president also has repeatedly denied that he plans to propose pensions and tax reform laws containing the changes alleged by protesters. He said he immediately rejected the idea of reducing youth salaries when a think tank proposed it. No reform has been proposed, he told viewers during a rare Facebook Live broadcast this week, adding he does not want to raise the pension age. It has been said that we want to pay young people less than minimum wage, and that's also a lie. Other groups of marchers are expected to participate to protest what they say is a lack of government action to prevent the murder of hundreds of human rights activists, corruption at universities, and other issues. Supporters of the march, which include major unions, allege the leader's government also wants to make the public pension fund, coal pension, private, and differentiate salaries by region. Police raids late on Tuesday drew wide criticism on social media when staff at the Cartel Urbano magazine posted videos showing cops rifling through artwork while staff questioned the reason for the raid. In Bogota, marchers are set to gather at 7 meeting points before converging on the central Boulevard Plaza, home to Congress and a block from the presidential palace. Elsewhere in the region, Chile's conservative government is grappling with the anti-austerity marches, the biggest crisis to hit the country since its return to democracy in 1990. Protests in Bolivia overwrote tampering allegations, lead longtime leftist President Evo Morales to resign earlier this month, and his ouster has inflamed tensions in crisis hit Nicaragua. I can't talk tonight. Nicaragua. The president this week authorized local authorities to adopt exceptional measures to contain protests if needed, including curfews and limits on carrying weapons and the sale of alcohol. Marchers are also against an announced plan by the government to join state companies under a single holding umbrella, alleged this will cost jobs and eliminate direct control over public funds. The country's migrant agency has shut land and river border crossing until early Friday morning because of the strike. The agency said it has expelled 24 foreign nationals who were affecting public order and national security. I'm going to look more into that because obviously it's going on there today. So I'd covered, the protests that were going on in Chile a little bit back whenever they started. This says Chilean police and soldiers backed by their commanders have carried out generalized attacks on people protesting over inequality with the intention of quote-unquote pushing and harming them, Amnesty International said in a report published on Thursday. So Erica Guevara Rosas, the rights group's America's director, told Reuters that its investigative team sent to the country to weigh allegations of excessive force and rights violations by security forces have found evidence of abusers not normally seen outside troubled Latin American nations like Venezuela, Nicaragua, and Honduras. She said they had been, quote-unquote, shocked to find evidence of excessive force used in Chile, widely seen as one of the region's most democratic and stable nations. Amnesty said it had confirmed 5 deaths at the hands of security forces as well as credible evidence of protesters being shot at with live ammunition, sexually abused tortured, beaten, and run over. There was a repeated pattern of abuse that suggested intention, it said. Rosa said police and army personnel had broken international law in the use of live ammunition, in crowd control, and its own protocols in liberal use of rubber bullets and tear gas. A spokesman of the Chilean police said all allegations that had been formally reported would be investigated. The army said it had not seen the amnesty report, but that it had ironclad commitment to observing human rights and would, quote-unquote, actively collaborate in the investigation into 4 deaths attributed to its troops. It added that when deployed for the 9-day state of emergency, it issued special instructions to its forces to ensure there was no excessive use of force or weaponry. Rosa said Chilean President Sebastián Piñera was responsible for failing to acknowledge the abuse or condemning them swiftly. She has claimed last month that, quote-unquote, we are at war, fed the violent repression we have seen on the streets. There was an intention to publish people, and this came not just from the police and military on the streets, but also those under whose command they were, she said. If this was punishment of the people who were protesting against government policies, then the highest levels of government, including Piñera, have responsibility for the human rights violations. Piñera told reporters in a briefing at the La Moneda that his government had written the rules governing use of force in Chile and updated them in March. If the protocols were not complied with, and I believe that it is possible that in some cases they were not, that would be investigated by prosecutors and would be punished by the courts of justice. That's how democracy works, and that's how the rule of law works, he said. On Sunday, the president acknowledged there had been, quote-unquote, some excessive use of force, abuse, and crime, and vowed no impunity for police and soldiers found responsible. Chile has seen a month of both peaceful protests and violent riots that started over anger at a hike in public transport fares and broadened to include grievances over low pensions and salaries, the high cost of living, and security forces abuse. The unrest left at least 23 dead, 7,000 detained, and over 2,000 demonstrators hospitalized, and more than 1,700 police officers injured, according to authorities and rights groups. More than 200 people have been hit in the eyes with tear gas canisters and rubber bullets, doctors have said. Prosecutors are examining more than 2,000 allegations of abuses by security forces, the head of the Public Prosecutors' Rights Division told Reuters last week. So you guys can go and check that out if you want to. I guess I'm going to go ahead and get off here. What time is it? So it's about an hour and a half. But I guess I'm going to go ahead and get off here. If you guys watch this video later, feel free to like and subscribe to the channel. All the news articles that I read are put in the description below, and you can go to the About section on my channel, and it has all the links to the podcast, DLive, Twitch, and my website. You guys can go there and check out the information I have there, and if ever you want to send information to me, you can get it through my email, and that's also linked in the About section of my channel. So I guess until next time, y'all bless, and you guys have a safe night, and shalom to you all.